Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. It's good to be back with you on our second show today. Just got finished here a few minutes ago with Max Kirby. Great discussion on security, data security, and data privacy. A much different conversation coming up in just a second. But the point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing amazing work in the world, people that we can learn from to get better at what we do. Now, the fun part about that, to me, is that we do this thing interactively. So you can get on LinkedIn, you can get on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all those platforms. We monitor those during the program, and you can send us your questions. And then I know Ariel is more than happy to answer those today and try to answer your questions. So that's what we're going to do. Hopefully we get some good questions today. But nonetheless, I've got a bunch for Ariel. So we'll, if you don't ask, I'm going to ask. But if you like the program, give it a like or share, and so that your network can benefit from these conversations, and obviously we can grow our audience a little bit. Today, on the second part of the show, I've got Ariel Garten. Ariel is an inspiring neuroscientist, an innovator, an entrepreneur, and host of the Untangle Podcast. Ariel is the co-founder of the highly successful tech startup Muse, and personally raised $18 million to fund Muse from Silicon Valley investors. She's been on stages across the world, at TED, at MIT. She's been featured in just about every magazine possible. I think CNN, Forbes, Fortune, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. And I'm glad to have her on. Ariel, welcome.
Thank you. It is my joy and pleasure to be here.
Well, I know we missed each other last week. I think we were supposed to do a mingle or something at Web Summit, and we didn't get to do that. But I know we caught up by text, and it's good to have you on. Finally, get you on the program. I've been wanting to sort of talk about you and your story for some time. So I'm glad to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
So I want to talk about meditation today. I want to talk about its benefits. I want to talk about Muse and how that works, and what you do at Muse. But I want to talk about you've got your podcast. How's that going? Have you been doing a lot of that? Have you been doing that podcast during COVID?
Oh my God, have I been podcasting during COVID? Yep. So on Untangle, we talk to meditators. We've talked about sleep, anxiety, stress. And so it's been a fascinating process of curating content that's going to be most useful for people during this crazy and amazing time.
Has this been a time for you that you've sort of been inspired?
So, I mean, it's very double-edged. On the one hand, I'm incredibly sad for the world. I'm incredibly heavy-hearted for the difficulties that people are going through, and the fear and the true loss and grief. On the other hand, it's a time where we see so much opportunity. We find new ways to reach out and connect with one another. We find new practices. We find new ways of being. So I think there is a ton of opportunity and silver linings. And I've also gotten to speak to a lot of people whose lives have actually improved during this time because they're working from home. They're able to spend time with their families. I know that was a big part of my own story for my, positive connection in this time. But it's also very difficult, and change is hard across the board.
No, you're absolutely right about this has been a blessing, and I know there's a lot of pain, but I've got two teenagers, and so I know that they've missed a considerable amount of their teenage or some of their high school time, and one of their summers. But boy, have I gotten to spend more time with them than I know that I would have ever again, right?
Yeah.
Because they're busy people, and they're active, and so as they grow older and get more independent, parents are the ones that don't get to see them as much. So for me, this has been a blessing. And actually having dinners, sit down and actually be able to have a conversation at dinner has been very nice. So you raised $18 million for Muse. Well, how did the idea come about? Where did the idea come from, and how did you make that happen? I know that's a really loaded question and probably a long answer, but I'd love to hear it.
Sure. So my own background comes from neuroscience and psychotherapy. I was a practicing psychotherapist, so I'd be teaching people to try to meditate, and it was not always the most successful. And at the same time in my work in neuroscience, I began collaborating with a man called Steve Mann. He's one of the inventors of the wearable computer. And he had an early brain-computer interface system, literally an EEG electrode that you would put next to your head, and it would track your brainwave activity. And we started to take people's brainwave activity, listen to their brainwave activity, and translate it into sound so they could hear what was going on in their own minds. And we'd actually create concerts where people could listen to the sound of their mind. And from there, I sort of stood back and said, wow, like this is incredible, and something that's very applicable, and something that actually can be created into a business and actually have utility in the world. So I got together with my co-founders, Chris Amony. He was one of Steve's master's students and just an incredibly brilliant engineer, and Trevor Coleman, who was really sharp at business and really knew how to create experiences that people loved. And the three of us got together and started Muse, not knowing exactly what it was going to become, but knowing that we had this, fascinating seed of an idea that you could translate people's brainwave activity into feedback. And as we started to explore what the various uses for that was, it became obvious that meditation really was, the killer app. That in meditation, we have this process where we're trying to quiet our mind, we're trying to understand what's going on inside, we're trying to interact with our thoughts, but there's no little coach or guru inside your head telling you when you're doing it right, or what's going on in there. And we recognize that with this technology, we could actually let you hear your own mind in very, very basic ways. We can't hear your thoughts, but we can just hear when you're focused and when you're relaxed. Just very, very basic shifts, but that those basic understandings of your internal workings could be profoundly transformational. And so we created Muse as a meditation tool that lets you know when you're focused and when your mind has wandered.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So how does, I'm a non-science brain. I have a different brain. So you're putting sounds to different brain waves. Is that how that works?
Mm-hmm.
Or that, okay. And so, but is the brain doing something specific when you are meditating? Is there a different, clearly it's doing something different than when you and I are talking, right? What is it? Can you explain what is the brain doing when you're at that, when you know that you're successfully in a meditative state?
So there are lots of different forms of meditation. The form of meditation that we use and use is focused attention. And that's one of the most common forms of meditation, where people are typically focusing on a word or their breath or a mantra or a spot on the wall. And during a focused attention meditation, what you're doing is literally focusing your attention. So you're focusing your attention on a single point. And what you see in your brainwave activity is actually a slowing of brainwave activity and a kind of cohesion of your brainwave activity. So you're seeing all the brainwave activity really simplified down to a much more unified level of activity. That's the simplest way to say it.
So
and then,
yes. It's okay.
You're in calm focus.
That makes sense.
And then when your mind wanders onto a thought and you start thinking about that thought, then we see a very different level of brainwave activity. So we can very easily understand when you're in focused attention in your meditation zone and when your mind wanders off into thought. And what we do with Muse is we use an audio landscape that very intuitively lets you know I'm focused versus my mind is wandering. The metaphor we use is your mind is like the weather. So when you're thinking or distracted, when you're not meditating, you hear it is stormy. And that becomes your cue to bring yourself back to quiet, focused attention. And then the sound quiets, the storm quiets. And it's this very simple, very beautiful way to understand what's going on in your mind and really essentially have like a personal trainer in there letting you know when you're in the zone and encouraging you to stay there.
I gotta think that's why a lot of meditation practices and people who start it never really get progress, right? Is because you how's the teacher know where you are, right? I mean, is that what you struggle? I guess that's what you struggled with when you were talking about it was hard to have success in teaching it.
It really can be very hard because, first of all, there's a lot of misconceptions about what meditation is. So, people sit down to meditate and they expect that their mind is supposed to go blank, which, by the way, it doesn't. And then you feel like you're doing it wrong because it's not going blank and you just have these thoughts and you just don't know what to do. Or even if you do know what to do, it can be very hard and frustrating to just sit there alone in silence with your thoughts and try to let them go and come back, which is the skill that you build over time when you meditate, but at first can be very hard to sink your teeth into. And so we recognize that if we could give people feedback and guidance, we could make that process of either starting your meditation practice or going deeper into it so much easier. And that's what Muse does. We've been in market now for 6 years and helped literally hundreds of thousands of people, probably about 500,000 people, start or deepen their meditation practice.
What's next for Muse?
Sleep. So one of the things that we heard from people using Muse was they were using it either at 6 a.m., people love to use it in the morning, or 10 p.m. to help them fall asleep. And so actually this is the Muse device here. So it has EEG sensors on the forehead. And people would be using this to help them fall asleep. And so we recognized that we had an opportunity to actually build something that was going to be really powerful for sleep. So we built this tool. So this is the Muse S.
Okay, love it.
Thank you. So it's a soft, comfy headband that you slip on as you're falling asleep, and it gives you these beautiful guided sleep journeys. So guided meditations paired with a soundtrack that's built from your body that's actually designed to entrain you into sleep. And then as you're asleep, Muse tracks your brain, heart, breath, and body to be able to give you sleep tracking that's literally more precise than any other sleep tracker on the market. It's equivalent to an actual sleep lab.
Wow. And are you partnering with, how are you getting this out to market? Are you in stores, or is it, where could you find it?
So when we first went to market, we did a combination of retail and online. We were in Best Buy, and we were in Best Buy, I think, in 2014, which was, a huge big deal back then to have a brain sensing headband that helps you meditate in Best Buy. And then over time, as retail has become less popular and online has become a much better way to educate people as to what the product is, who else uses it, why it matters, the majority of our sales are all online, either through our own website, choosemuse.com, or through Amazon.
Okay. The sleep stuff is amazing. And what can it, there are all kind of benefits to it, but what do you see? I mean, why did you go into, is that just a natural, I guess it seems like a natural progression, I guess, into sleep and into.
Yeah, on the one hand, it's a very natural progression. On the other hand, when we look at the problems that people have in their lives that take away from being able to be happy, feel, cognitively capable, be able to have good attention, feel like you have good emotional self-control, sleep is a massive part of this. So if you're not sleeping well at night, you're typically a little bit more grumpy and irritated. You look at a kid who hasn't slept well and they're really not focused. They really don't have great emotional self-control. Adults are the same way. And so we recognize that if we could help people fix their sleep, we would be doing a really great service. And there's sort of this virtuous feed-forward cycle of sleeping well at night, then being more cognitively capable and more emotionally self-regulated so you can meditate, more effectively during the day. That gives you even better control, so you can fall asleep more easily because now you've learned to quiet your mind. Because the biggest problem that people have in falling asleep is that their mind is racing and won't shut off. And really, in meditation, what you learn is how to manage that racing mind, how to let go of those thoughts, how to be able to move your attention somewhere else and drift into a different state. And so the skill of meditating is actually so incredibly complementary to the skill of helping you fall asleep and stay asleep.
Are you guys talking, are there ways that people can go to the site and they learn about meditation and learn, do you walk people through the whole stage of this?
So you can go to the site and you can see lots of the research around meditation. We have a blog with tons of information about meditation and, of course, how Muse works and videos. But if you have any specific meditation questions, I'm happy to answer them here.
No, I just wonder, if people wanted to start a practice. I think that people are starting to really understand, even in my coaching clients, at the corporate level, there's a realization that meditation is extremely helpful and can be a really great way to, frankly, just to help you become a better leader. If you can think and process things better, and you can slow down, you make better decisions, and you're better, in a lot of ways, a better person. But are you walking, or is there a way that you're helping people sort of start a practice, and or is that still something that you want them to have an outside person to help them with, or is Muse actually helping them start practices?
Muse is the thing that helps you start the practice from scratch. So we have a lot of coaches that, or like I was a psychotherapist that would try to teach meditation to your patients, and it's frustrating. So now it's just like, here's a Muse, go away. Like go figure, you can meditate. Muse really walks you from the beginning. We have a lot of doctors, and when patient comes into their office, they want to recommend meditation for something going on in the patient's life, but like the doctor doesn't know how to meditate. And so now they're simply like, here, take this device, go home, it'll tell you what to do. So it really walks you from the very basics and lets you see your progress session after session. So you can actually see the impact that the meditation is having in your life.
That's amazing that you've gotten to the stage where doctors are recommending it now, because that's got to be, that's pretty new, I would imagine.
Yeah, the curve on meditation has been so rapid. Back in 2012, when we were creating a meditation tool, people would be like, but really, who's going to use it? And then in 2013, meditation was on the cover of Time magazine. And then in 2014, it was like all of a sudden every big CEO and athlete were meditating. And here by 2020, it's just the thing that you do. And then from a scientific validation perspective, we started a study back in 2014 with the Mayo Clinic with breast cancer patients awaiting surgery using Muse. And years later, they published the results. And it showed that women using Muse through the cancer care process decreased their stress and fatigue and improved their quality of life. And since then, there's been at least about 200 different studies using Muse. So, we're really seeing both healthcare get on board in a big way, as well as the general, consumer uptake of meditation in general and using Muse.
In terms of sleep, I'd love to see this movement away from prescription medication, right, to sleep, to using a tool like Muse to help people sleep better. Because I got to think that there's an epidemic of overprescribing sleep medication for people, and that's just not. This seems like a much better way to go. Is there any progress there, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there really is an epidemic of overprescribing sleep medication, and sleep medication actually doesn't let you get good sleep. It doesn't actually let you get the full, deep, natural sleep that you need. And when you wake up, you're groggy. And then you end up on the cycle of prescription medication dependence, because as soon as you go off, you had what's called rebound insomnia, which means that you sleep even worse when you get off the prescription medication. So most people typically jump back on because it's so uncomfortable to be sleeping that badly. And so with Muse, we're really thrilled to be giving this totally, prescription medication free methodology that teaches you how to sleep. Because there's some very simple reasons why people's sleep is broken. Number one, people tend to be worrying at night and then worrying that they're not sleeping. And so as soon as your mind is cognitively engaged, you're not able to shut it off. It's hard to fall into sleep. And then when you're not sleeping, you start to worry that you're not sleeping, which keeps your mind cognitively engaged, which increases your cortisol levels, which means you're not sleeping. Like cortisol is the hormone that your body brings in the morning to give you a sense of alertness. And so when you're getting cortisol in the night, it's just keeping you alert. And so when you learn to very simply shift the mental pattern to be able to calm your body and then to be able to reduce your cortisol levels, it can actually become quite simple to fall into sleep. It's not a difficult thing to learn, but it really does help to have a tool that teaches you how to do it step by step and guides you into those states of calm.
I'm going to switch subjects here for a second, and you've talked about how you ignored your naysayers to pursue this, to pursue your dreams. Talk about that a little bit. What was that journey like?
Sure. So back in 2010, I was building a brain sensing headband that is going to help you meditate. And this was like, as I mentioned, long before meditation was a big thing. And I'd, go to raise money in Silicon Valley and they're like, what's the killer app? And I'd be like, meditation. And they'd be like, yeah, right. And so we were creating something that at the time seemed quite nuts. And there were a lot of naysayers that were along the way. And it would have been very easy to, buy into any one of them and to just be like, oh no, this is never going to work. We're not going to do that. But quite luckily, I had a very quiet inner critic. So as much as there might have been people outside who were like, this seems kind of crazy, inside, I wasn't having those voices inside of me that tell us most of the things that inner critics tell you, like, oh, you're not good enough. You're never going to do this. And so I was able to persist where I could see the success. And along the way, I was getting no's, but I was actually also getting a lot of yeses. And a lot more yeses than no's. A lot of people saying like, this is incredible. We need this. Yes. We're not sure if you're the one who can do it because you're, a tiny little female from Toronto. But I didn't internalize any of that negativity. My inner critic didn't turn on and say, oh, well, you can never do it because, you're a woman, or you can never do it because you're not in Silicon Valley, or you've never run a startup before. And, or you don't have an MBA from Harvard, and. And so I had this very clear internal sense of my own capability, independent of the messages that I might have been getting from the outside when I stood in front of a VC from Silicon Valley, looking at me being like, I'm going to give you a few million bucks. And ultimately with my own internal sense of I can do this, and my own internal belief system, actually raised quite a lot of money from Silicon Valley investors and from people like Ashton Kutcher, and from people who I networked my way to be able to raise money that turned out to be actually an extraordinarily good investment for them. So, when I look at the tools and techniques of avoiding naysayers, there are a few that you want to particularly, hone in on. And the first one is turn off the naysayer inside of yourself. Because as much as there might be critics outside of you, the biggest critic that you have is inside of you. And we tend to use this critic in order to make us succeed. It's, we think that if we tell ourselves that something was done badly, it will make us do it better. If we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, then maybe that might motivate us, because maybe that's, what our dad told us in an effort to motivate us. But actually that voice inside of you is holding you back. Actually, that voice inside of you is just making everything a little bit more painful in your life. And when you look at that voice and you say, actually, I am good enough, and actually, I can do this, and actually, it's okay that I don't have all these things, I can figure it out, then you're much more able to accomplish anything in front of you much more effortlessly.
I'm writing a book on this, actually, and it's finished. And I call a lot of that stuff that you're putting in your head mental junk food, right? Because it you're absolutely right. You nailed it. It holds you back, and it stops you from being the best version of yourself. And but that's I'm glad you brought that up, because that is so true. And what I want to ask you this: how did you? Is it natural for you to have that sort of quiet inner voice, or to be able to quiet it, or is that something you work on?
A bit of both. So I came into the world with a quieter inner critic, I think. So I got lucky that way. I got a little bit of a headwind. And then it's something that I actively work on. One of the greatest powers of meditation is helping you observe the stories in your head, and then to assess if they are actually true or they are actually useful. As you said, our head is filled with so much junk food, just garbage, that actually is not true and actually is not relevant. It's leftover stories that somebody else told you, or leftover things that you assumed, or beliefs that you created based on faulty information because you were 4 at the time and weren't interpreting the world correctly. Right. And so when you are able to, through a meditation practice, take the time to actually observe your thoughts, you can start to listen to the voices that are in there, decide whose they are, and whether or not they're actually serving you. Yeah. Because so often we hold on to these things because we think that they're serving us, or we hold on to them just because they're there and we assume they're supposed to be there. And neither of them are necessarily true. You can actually have control over the contents of your own mind.
And that's what really helps you overcome those fears, right? Those are the things that helps you that's what helps you overcome that anxiety and the fear and the biases and stuff that we have. Do you see yourself as courageous in any way?
I see myself as very courageous.
Yeah.
I see myself as incredibly courageous. Yes. A friend of mine recently reflected back to me. We were in university together, and she's like, "Yeah, you would do all those things that I would think of as risky, and I never saw them as risky. I saw them as things that I was completely capable of doing, and so I did them." In my later life, when I was young, I just had a lot of courage. I had a lot of confidence and just felt like I could do these things. In my adult life, I now actually have a practice of confronting the things that I'm afraid of. So, that means first identifying things that cause you fear. And it could be like, a networking opportunity, or it could be trying to cook dinner for somebody that, makes you a little bit nervous. There's all these things in life that causes fear. They don't have to be big fears like a pandemic or fires, also real fears. I actually take the opportunity every time I sense something that's a fear that I have a hesitation to, because there's an emotional tension, because there's a closing off. And I intentionally see it. I feel that fear, and I know that it is just a sensation. It is just a feeling, and I'm able to ride through it, do it, and do the thing. Because so often we are held back in our life by our fears. Our fears become walls that push us back or keep us from the opportunities that are on the other side. Networking is the easiest one to understand, where you're, in a room. These days it's a virtual room, in a room full of people, and, you'd like to approach somebody, but you get a little sense of fear. And maybe there's some stories that come into your head like, oh, maybe they don't want to talk to me, or what do I have to offer them? And then that little bit of fear pulls you back. And so you choose to not do it. You just stay in your place of comfort. But if you merely stepped through that fear, just walked through the wall that the fear has created, on the other side is invariably a conversation with a human that's usually, very happy to chat with you, would actually be interested in supporting you, because most humans are actually in networking situations are interested in supporting each other. And an opportunity for you to take your idea forward and a new person that you've met. In 99.99999% of the situations, networking goes great. And in those few that it doesn't, it's okay too. It's okay to have small failures here and there. So the practice in my life is to feel the fear and do it anyways, to see it, to know it's just fear, and to know that there's no reason that fear needs to hold me back. It's just an experience that I can step through.
It's an incredible amount of self-awareness, I think, that and maybe we don't all have that amount of it, but I think, I would agree. I think you're pretty courageous and pretty brave. Saying that, we're at almost our half hour here. What scares you right now, and what are you excited about? So what scares me right now is the lack of communication between different factions in the U.S. That really scares me right now. And the pitting of each group against the other. 1 second. Get some water. Yeah. The pitting of each group against the other as bad or wrong. And so in each group, there is this perception that the other person must be wrong. Whereas in reality, both groups just want the same thing. They just want happiness for their families, a safe country, and people to generally get along, live a nice life, live in nice homes, and their kids to go to school and have grandkids. That's all we all really want. And so this negative othering, I think, is very poisonous and very unhelpful. And it's happening, on both sides. And what makes me really excited right now is the opportunity that we have, as the world is shifting and changing, to change the way that we do things, to change the way that we interact, to, find humanity in different ways, to be able to reach out and connect, not physically at this point in most situations, but
virtually or by the phone, or to spend the time to connect with yourself because you have more space now and more time alone than you may ever have. So I think there's an extraordinary amount of opportunity, and that opportunity makes me very excited. And I think there's also the opportunity for people to help one another in ways that haven't been so obvious as they have before. I'm part of a group in my local community where if anybody needs help because of how they've been affected by the pandemic, they simply post it. And as a result, I've given so many things to people in need that I would have never been able to before. There are people who are reaching out and saying, I'm having a really tough time. And then 100 people will reply back in the thread, like, we're here for you. Call me if you need to. I'm a stranger, but here's my phone number. And so it's created an incredible sense of support and connection in a way that most people in this group had never experienced before. So I think there's a lot to be excited and optimistic about at this moment in time, as odd as it seems.
Now, all those stories that you just said, I hear so many stories like that from communities where people now actually know their neighbors, right? I had a friend in New York City said I hadn't met the two people on the side of me in my apartment building, but now we're in a little pod, right? We grocery shop for each other. We have these porch kind of coffees and teas in the afternoon. So it's just been wonderful, sort of to get to know people around them a little bit better. One other question I have to ask now that it came up. What is, for you, how is technology going to, it's going to change, it's changing the world, right?
Yes.
You look at how fast technology's, work is now changed dramatically. And I don't think I think work is evolving and the definite, my teenager's summer job this summer was online. It was a remote job. So, I think the pandemic has sped things up in terms of work, changes at work. What's your view on where we're going? How is technology really going to change and make our lives better? And do we have to be careful that it doesn't widen the gap in things like health equity and social justice, racial justice, social justice, income inequality? How do we, just your quick take on technology and how do we use it for good?
Sure. It's a huge and awesome question. So the first important thing to remember about technology is that technology needs to be in service of humanity. So, there's some technology that is not in service of humanity, and there's lots of technology that is in service of humanity. You and I being able to connect virtually right now with an audience of people who are listening to us, who can write in, all of this is technology in service of humanity. The ability to have a virtual job, the ability for somebody in a lower income situation who can't travel to a great school, they can actually now take an online course from MIT or Harvard. There's a huge equalizing factor in technology if you have access to some basic technological tools, which is why there are so many huge projects to give access to the internet to everybody and a laptop or a device that everybody can access the internet through. So, I think there's a lot of forces that are trying to ensure that we have equality of technological access, so that everybody can have the same level of, or a similar baseline level of access to the tools and the knowledge and the techniques that technology can bring us. I think we are co-evolving with technology. Our society is changing, and it is now, intertwined with technology in such a way that technology is growing and changing us and evolving us, and we are adapting to it. I think as a species, those who are able to adapt are those who are able to succeed. But that's not to say that people who have, no connection to technology, no access to technology, are not doing badly. We're still at the point where you can effectively live, pretty much off grid and still be the same human as somebody who lives connected to technology. You're just living a different life. And thankfully, those options still exist for us so that we can have the kinds of choices that we want with the level of technology that we're choosing in our lives. And ultimately, we have to remember that technology is a tool, and it's about how you use your tools. So, we make a tool that helps you see into your mind to help you understand yourself better. It's basically like a telescope or a microscope or a mirror to see the self. So you can meditate with or without technology, absolutely. But, using this mirror, this technology, or this telescope gives you insights that are useful that you as a human can then use. And so I think technology that empowers you and gives you agency and more insight and more choice is great technology. Technology that takes away from the human or disempowers you, removes your agency, is terrible technology. And we need to keep that in mind in all the technological choices we make in our lives.
Yeah, 5 minutes. I want to ask you one more question.
Sure, happy to.
Sorry. You have a parenting toolkit. What is mindful parenting? And talk about that. And is meditation good for kids? And can they be?
All right. So I have a 4-year-old. So I've been able to practice a lot of mindful parenting. Is meditation good for kids? Yes, meditation is fantastic for kids. So there is a study from a school in British Columbia, and they introduced a meditation program. It's actually Goldie Hawn's Mind Up program, which is in schools in 37 countries. Mm-hmm. And there, the kids who learned meditation saw a 15% improvement in their math scores. Whoa, like who'd have thought? Yeah. A 25% improvement in their pro-social behavior and about a 25% decrease in their aggression.
Wow.
Yes. So is meditation good for kids? Yes.
Okay. So, boy, how did you get 2 teenage boys on that on that program?
So Muse is actually one way. Like, it gamifies meditation, and it just makes it like this fun, cool thing that you do that's now digital. But there are also lots of other, simple tools out there, guided meditations. Mm-hmm. And what I'm noticing is that meditation is in the school and is in people's consciousness. So if you have younger children, you've probably noticed them come home and, take deep breaths or take mindful moments. And they're starting to bring in the language of meditation into their school, into their lives. And then from a mindful parenting perspective, meditation is very, very helpful for parenting because it helps you observe your own state before you act or react to your child. So often your kid does something, it triggers you, you blow up, you react to them, they get worse, cycle that goes downhill. So what meditation allows you to do is when your kid does something, observe that sensation inside you, which is going like, whoo, and the steam that's coming out of your ears. Know that you're in that state. Do something to calm yourself down for a second, and then go appropriately respond, which might be with, a natural consequences solution to their action. You watch television you watch the internet for too long when I told you not to, so no internet for the next day, or whatever it is, which is going to then actually teach them how to shift their behavior because it's in a clear, like, damage reward structure. If this, then, rather than teaching them that when I do something wrong, somebody's going to yell at me and my amygdala is going to, go into hyperdrive, then I'm not going to be able to think clearly, then I'm not going to be able to be rational about the choices that I'm making, and downhill. So it really allows you to bring a rationality into it to teach with like clear behavioral reinforcement and natural consequences, as opposed to just this back and forth emotional power struggle.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, I will let you go now. Thank you.
Happy to come back anytime as well.
Well, I want to have you back on to talk more. There's so much more to talk about, and because I want to dig into probably a full show on how to start a meditation practice and different types of meditation and some of the benefits. And we really didn't get much into that today. A little bit, but from a leadership perspective, from a business perspective, how it can help you. I do a lot of executive coaching, and so I do want to dig into, how as a business leader, how it helps you become better. And I think that would be an interesting program if we focused on that. But I wanted to talk about all this stuff today, so so thank you, and thank you for pleasure. Spending some time with us here on Power Lunch Live. You can look at the upcoming schedule on the website at powerlunch.live. And until tomorrow, we'll be back at 12 noon tomorrow. We'll see you then. Have a great day. Go to Muse. You can buy it online at muse.com.
ChooseMuse.com. ChooseMuse.com.
Okay, great. Visit the website, people. It's good for it'd be good for you. I know I'm going to go shop now. So you guys have a great day. Thanks.
Bye-bye.